More indictments unsealed this morning as the FBI has arrested and charged 3 investment bankers at JP Morgan as part of their investigation into a massive gold market manipulation fraud. Zero Hedge article today talking about how many had written them off as conspiracy theorists when they were reporting on signs of manipulation in the precious metals market. But as it turns out, trading desks at some of the world's largest banks were deeply involved in what the Department of Justice is now describing as a, quote, massive multi-year scheme to manipulate the market for precious metals futures contracts and defraud market participants. There's been other very strange news with JP Morgan recently, including a ship that was seized by feds in a $1.3 billion cocaine bust that turned out to be owned by JP Morgan. Just this summer, a cargo ship was seized by feds with nearly 20 tons of cocaine on board with an estimated street value of $1.3 billion. The ship owned by JP Morgan. It is owned by JP Morgan Asset Management clients through a transportation fund managed by the bank. JP Morgan leased the ship to Mediterranean Shipping Company, a Switzerland-based shipping company which is solely responsible for the vessel's crews and operations. JP Morgan declined to comment on record, but the Switzerland shipping company that it is leased to had responded saying, quote, unfortunately, shipping and logistics companies are from time to time affected by trafficking problems. That was one other news story involving JP Morgan from the summer, and now another big update with JP Morgan today. These big arrests, and the Department of Justice is accusing JP Morgan's precious metals trading desk of being a criminal enterprise. In the indictment unsealed this morning, the Department of Justice charged Michael Novak, a JP Morgan former head of its precious metals trading desk, and Greg Smith, another trader on JP Morgan's metals desk, in the probe. Both men were put on leave over the summer as the Department of Justice investigation neared its conclusion, and Novak was previously named in a civil suit brought by the CFTC. A third trader named in the indictment, Christopher Jordan, traded precious metals at JPM. It is part of a broader investigation with others involved. Some have already pleaded guilty, possibly more to come. There's some more details. Part of the lead up to the arrests that took place today involves a guilty plea late last year by a former JP Morgan trader, John Edmonds, pleaded guilty to 1 count of commodities fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, price manipulation, and spoofing, also having to do with U.S. metals markets. This is part of the government's plan to bring charges against people higher up the chain at the bank as federal prosecutors are closing in on JP Morgan officials in this investigation. This article also names Edmonds, saying that with help from at least 2 of the bank's former traders who pleaded guilty, these 2 are helping feds bring more charges against people higher up the chain at the bank. The traders who admitted guilt said the manipulation was routine, sanctioned by higher-ups, and went on for years. While at JP Morgan, I was instructed by supervisors and more senior traders to trade in a certain fashion, namely to place orders that I intended to cancel before execution, former trader John Edmonds said at an October 2018 hearing after pleading guilty to commodities fraud and conspiracy. This investigation into the investment bank grows out of a multi-bank U.S. crackdown on manipulation of commodities markets using techniques including spoofing. In a press release accompanying the indictment, the Assistant Attorney General accused all 3 men of scheming to manipulate the precious metals market while potentially harming their bank's clients. The assistant director in charge of the FBI's New York field office added that this manipulation likely impacted, quote, correlated markets and the clients of the bank they represented. Smith, Novak, Jordan, and their co-conspirators allegedly engaged in a complex scheme to trade precious metals in a way that negatively affected the natural balance of supply and demand, said the FBI Assistant Director in charge, William F. Sweeney Jr. of the FBI's New York field office. He went on to say, quote, not only did their alleged behavior affect the markets for precious metals, but also correlated markets and the clients of the bank they represented. For as long as we continue to see this type of illegal activity in the marketplace, we'll remain dedicated to investigating and bringing to justice those who perpetrate these crimes. They add that 3 other banks had recently agreed to pay $50 million to settle civil claims by the CFTC. They also talk about how the behavior by these investment bankers at JP Morgan dates back more than 10 years to 2009. This was laid out as part of the charges today. And there are also chat logs that they have here and that were shown as part of the indictment that expose just how blatant the manipulation was and how little the traders did to conceal it. Here's one of these chat logs with messages from a former JP Morgan employee who already pleaded guilty last year, leading into this part of the investigation. Previous chat log from the JP Morgan employee openings. He says, so you know it's Greg bidding up on the futures trying to get some off. Somebody responds, sweet, mate. The JP Morgan employee responds, in case you were watching some large bids come into market. The response to that is, appreciate that worked. At approximately the same time, Smith was engaged in the trading sequence involving deceptive orders alleged in the paragraph above. Next section says, on September 24th, 2009, in an electronic chat, there was this exchange, the following conversation saying, I offered a lot of SIL switches, 100 to 200 a switch, spoofed locals after number and hopefully Mr. Shack. The response is, good man. So that does look like they were being pretty blatant about what they were doing. More details from the full indictment unsealed today. They also talk about the third individual that was charged, former JP Morgan employee Christopher Jordan. At one point in September of 2010, the indictment states that he was interviewed by the CFTC in connection with a CFTC inquiry into the manipulation of silver prices. During the interview, Jordan knowingly and intentionally gave false answers to questions from a CFTC investigator. Then in 2013, Smith, this other individual arrested today, was interviewed by the CME Group in connection with a CME Group inquiry into Smith's trading practices. During this interview, Smith knowingly and intentionally gave false answers to questions from a CME Group investigator. It's important to emphasize how this is connected to higher-ups at the bank, and that relates to these earlier guilty pleas as well, where one of these metal traders who already pleaded guilty last year had indicated that they collaborated on spoofing with their supervisors. So that they were working with the Department of Justice on an ongoing investigation for other charges, and that this crime was part of a conspiracy with the bank and other internal traders. A lot more people involved. Many, though, already anticipating what this might lead to. One article saying, should Novak also plead guilty and provide evidence against his superiors, things will get even more interesting. It would signal that the matter is not going to be handled in the usual way, with some lower-level staffer taking the fall and regulators pretending that the problem has been addressed. Justice Department officials also saying, "We are continuing to follow the facts wherever they lead, and that the indictments today are not the end of the Justice Department's investigation into JP Morgan." And JP Morgan still has these other legal problems related to allegations of their manipulative trading practices in precious metals markets, in particular, including a proposed class action. These civil proceedings are temporarily paused as federal investigators are warning that allowing the cases to proceed may interfere with their investigation into the nation's largest bank. So something else to look at as well, the civil proceedings, how this case might affect that. Will these latest charges today help lead to the arrest of more higher-up investment bankers and traders? Leave a comment and tell me what you think. I do have a link in the video description to my Patreon account, patreon.com/realityreader. You can support the channel there, or paypal.me/realityreader. Thanks everybody that has helped support the channel, helping share the information. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you could leave a like on the video, it's greatly appreciated. And tell me what you think in a comment. I will follow up soon. Thanks everyone.